Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello and welcome to episode 57 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Thanks for joining me this week. In episode 57 this week, I interview Donna Cook, who has published over a dozen books in 2 genres. She writes epic fantasy under her own name and writes contemporary romance as Jordyn White. Now, in this episode, Donna talks not only about her writing life as both Donna and Jordyn, but she also offers up some advice on an important topic that creative types like you and I don't often focus on: cash flow for writers. Now, I saw her do a talk on this topic at the WMG Business Masterclass taught by Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush in Vegas last fall, and I wanted to have her on the show to share her insights via this podcast because I know you reflectives will enjoy that. But before we get to the interview, I want to say a word about this episode's sponsor. Earlier this week, Findaway Voices announced 2 new international distribution options, MLOL and AudiobooksNZ. Now, MLOL is the Media Library Online. They are Italy's largest library distributor, serving about 6,000 public libraries, 1,800 university libraries, and 700 school libraries. They actually serve over 800,000 registered users, and last year they achieved a new milestone of 10 million patron transactions. AudiobooksNZ or if you're American, AudiobooksNZ are a service local to New Zealand, and they serve Oceania in New Zealand dollars, which is one of the things that makes them unique. It's great for local consumers, and as you know, I talk a lot about international pricing as an important thing, and it's important for consumers to be able to pay in their own local currency. And so the New Zealand dollar, which gets a bad rap like the Canadian dollar, very similar in terms of its strength, the Canadian, Australian, and New Zealand dollars, very similar in those Commonwealth-style countries. Now, consumers there can access the catalog from AudiobooksNZ either a la carte or credit subscription models. And again, great for consumers to have choice like that. Now, this is just 2 great ways that Findaway Voices gives global distribution to authors, an even bigger global opportunity than just last week for distribution of audiobooks from indie authors. And you can check out more about how you can leverage those tools yourself by checking them out at starkreflections.ca/findaway. There will be a link in the show notes at starkreflections.ca to this blog article so you can check out those details. Now, in terms of a personal update, it's been an extremely busy week of meetings, supporting authors, and local travel. I actually had to put on some pants this week. Not only pants, but a dress shirt and a sports coat a few times, 3 days in a row. Oh my goodness. Now, I may have mentioned this before on the podcast, but I'm on the PAC, or the Professional Advisory Committee, for the new Creative Writing and Publishing degree program at Sheridan College. And that's Sheridan College based in Oakville, Mississauga, and Brampton campuses. Now, Sheridan, most people know Sheridan as a world-renowned animation college. That is where my best buddy Steve went to college back a long time ago. Let's just say it's about 30 years ago. But it was really exciting about this new writing and publishing program because it's an amazing program. Of course, I'm biased because I've been an advisor for this program for a number of years, but it's great to see the program in action and already into its 2nd year. This is the type of amazing balanced degree that I would have loved to take as a student. Now, I ended up getting a degree in English language and literature because there were no programs like this at the time. Now, my part in the counsel and the advising that I've been providing for the last several years was ensuring that the curriculum they were building included elements of the business of publishing, as well as insightful information about digital publishing and self-publishing opportunities available to balance out the creative writing and the traditional publishing information that is part of the course. But related to this week I participated in 2 information gathering sessions held at Sheridan regarding their engagement with student needs, with the local industry, for example, because I come from the book industry, as well as the community. And these were amazingly informative sessions, lots of great sharing. I got an opportunity to connect with other folks from the university, not just the amazing people from the creative writing and publishing program, but other faculty members and people from different departments at Sheridan. It was fantastic, but it was also quite time-consuming. They were half-day sessions, and of course the drive in and out was an additional hour or more each way. I also did a Meet the Expert session on Monday night in Toronto at the monthly CAPS, which is the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, at the monthly meeting for CAPS. And it was 4 30-minute back-to-back sessions. There were 8 of us in total at different tables where people could basically sit down with you for half an hour and you sort of shared some information and then they could ask questions. So I was obviously sharing insights about publishing opportunities for writers. And as you can imagine, based on my background, there was lots of love for digital publishing, ebooks, for Kobo, for Draft to Digital in my interactive presentations. That was a lot of fun. Now, of course, apart from these things, I did do some Draft to Digital work, some work supporting some authors that I am helping out, and I haven't gotten any writing or audiobook recording done, and I always feel bad when I don't get any writing done in a week. So next week I'm double committing to scheduling some stuff first thing in the morning before I crack open the email and social media. And I haven't even done any further analysis of my 2018 sales that I had talked about in the last 2 episodes. So I'm going to schedule some time for a little bit more analysis that I can do in the next week, and then also hopefully share some of that in episode 58. Now, I was also recently on a podcast with Wynne Charles. She had me on her podcast last week, and I'll share a link to that in the show notes. And it was a really fun conversation that we had, and I'm going to be having Wynne come on a future episode. I'll be interviewing her very shortly, and you'll be able to hear me ask her questions. So before I move on to the interview, I just want to pause and welcome new patron to the show. Now, welcome, Pranathi K. Now, I really hope I pronounced your name correctly, but thank you, Pranathi, for your support of the show, which helps pay for my time in producing these weekly episodes. And for as little as $1 a month, you too can become a patron of the show, and you can have access to additional bonus audio content, as well as some video and text-based content that I post for my patrons at patreon.com/starkreflections. So welcome, Pranathi. And for you and for everyone else, that is the end of my personal update, my talk about patrons and my talk about sponsors. Let's get into this fascinating and insightful conversation with Donna Cook. Hey, Donna, thanks so much for joining me here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I was really excited because when we were both in Vegas at the workshop that Dean and Chris put on, I was so enthralled with the presentation that you gave looking at finances, because I think it's not something that we look at. As indie authors, we get excited about the business and marketing and creativity and all those things, and we forget about some of the core basics. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about why you decided to do that, and maybe a little bit of advice for writers, on how to focus on finances.
I think it's something that's overlooked because a lot of us are afraid of it. I think that in general, this goes beyond just writers, our culture in general, we don't really talk about money, and we certainly don't talk about personal finances and how to manage these things, but it can be really critical. And as I shared in Vegas, I don't have any sort of money education from my parents. I was kind of a mess. I got myself into quite a bind in my 30s, and just out of sheer desperation, I turned to a friend who taught me what I needed to know to kind of turn things around. And I was amazed at the power of it. Now, at that point, I wasn't a career author. I hadn't, published my first book or anything yet. But once I started that business, I just sort of naturally applied the principles that I had learned in my personal life to my business. I just did it automatically because why wouldn't I? And it has 100% kept me in business because my margins, I think like a lot of authors and a lot of small businesses, my margins are tight. And there's that statistic that 4 out of 5 new businesses are out of business in 5 years, or whatever the statistic is. Most small businesses don't succeed. And this is a big reason why. And so I feel like it's a disservice to not talk about it more. So I feel really passionate about it. And I felt that, that's a pretty advanced crowd there in Vegas. And I thought that that was something of value. I think regardless of how advanced you are as an author, we don't always talk about money. And I think too, it's not as scary as people think. Our businesses are not complicated. We're not running Amazon. There's just not that much to it. So even though there might be creatives who are like, I can't handle money, I can't handle, this isn't me, I'm not a math person. If you can make a calculator do addition for you, you can handle this. But it's really powerful, it really is. And it has definitely saved my business more than once to understand how to look at how money flows both now and in the future, to be able to see down the road what's going to happen, so I don't get myself in a bind that would shutter my business.
Okay. Wow. So, I mean, I think one of the things is your presentation required visuals, and I'm a visual person. So,
Me too.
being able to see that and understand money flow. Are there ways for people who are listening in audio? What are some of the basic principles of understanding money flow that that
Yeah,
helps them?
I've thought about how I can explain this so that listeners can understand it, because I'm a visual person too. So I'll do a very basic explanation.
Okay.
So let's say your average, a lot of people, when they do a budget, they'll do a monthly budget.
Okay.
I'm going to use fake numbers, $400 a month. My outgoing is $350. That gives me $50 left over, right?
Okay.
But that's it doesn't give us all the information that we need, especially as writers, because our income goes up and down, our expenses go up and down. It's not that solid, right?
Okay.
So cash flow is just taking into consideration how much money do you have when you start at the beginning of the month and factoring that in, right? So let's
Okay.
say you start a month with $10 and you bring in 400 and you spend 350. You don't have $50 left over, you have 60 because you started
Okay.
with 10, right? So cash flow is just taking those numbers and projecting them out month to month to month. And the advantage of that is that you can plan a deficit in a month. So I'll use an example. For I do a lot of, like, not a lot anymore, but I used to do a lot of like shows and conventions for my fantasy. And so I would have to order, do a print run of, a few $1,000s to order the books that I needed for shows. I'm not going to get that money back for a few months because I have to do the shows first,
Right.
right? Well, a lot of authors, what are they going to do? They're going to throw that on a credit card, right? And then your
Yeah.
your margins are even worse because now you're paying interest on all that. And what if the show doesn't go the way you wanted, and then you can get, so there's all sorts of reasons why it's better to just have that cash. Well, one specific month you may not have the money for that, but if you plan it out ahead, you can sort of hold money in reserve for the 3 or 4 months or whatever it is leading up to it. So the problem that a lot of businesses will run into is they have plenty of money coming in, they might have good profit margins, but that's the kind of thing they're not taking into consideration. Any big outlays they might have, any months where income is lower than they thought it was going to be. If you can project out, you can see down the road what's going to happen and take care of any potential problems you might have so that it isn't a problem. And it's actually not that hard. And it's
Right.
really empowering too. And I think that that's something that, if there's nothing else that people get out of it, this is empowering. This can give you the power that you need to help your business be successful.
Okay. That's kind of cool. And I think one of the things, and you mentioned this, right, talking about credit, because it's not just the money you owe, but it's the additional interest charges, and that's part of the flow, right? That additional cost.
Right. I mean, if you're charging something, you're paying interest on that, right? Like, it isn't just whatever you paid for the books or a laptop or whatever it is. Some people will go to McDonald's. I used to, when I was younger, I would go through McDonald's and charge McDonald's. Like, there's no logic to this. This was just crazy that I did it. But yet I know I'm not alone. I was not the
Right.
only one doing that. And I don't know, it just made such a big difference in my life to have somebody sit down and explain to me, this is how money works. It put me in charge of my money instead of always feeling at the mercy of this money storm happening around me. I didn't understand what I needed to know. But I think for a lot of creatives, they think, well, I have to be a finance person. I have to have it. You don't. It's really very simple. I talked for an hour there in Vegas. I pretty much said everything I had to say about it. It's not like you have to go on and on for, years learning things. It's very basic, but it's so powerful. It can do
Right.
so much for you if you understand it.
Okay, so that is awesome. So for people who are listening, where can they go to get some more information and to learn more about how you can help them in this regard?
Okay, so I have a course that I put together. The course sort of came about accidentally. This isn't the focus of my business. I'm an author first. However, there aren't any tools out there that I've been able to find that track cash flow the way I wanted to be able to do it. So over the course of several years, I built myself a tool. I
Right.
got it really automated. This is all inside of Excel. And then as I talked to more and more people, they wanted it. They wanted to know how it worked. So I put together a course that explains how the tool works, but of course I also have to explain what cash flow is and how does that work and how do you project it and why does that matter. So it's a pretty short course. I think it's an hour or two, I don't remember, and then it comes with the Excel sheet. That tool may or may not be useful for you, but it has been useful for a lot of people. So where you go is, it's under my pen name. It's a redirect. So it's jordynwhitebooks.com/courses, and that will redirect you to the Teachable page where you can get the information on what cash flow is, how you monitor, why it matters, and then the tool is there in case you want to use it too. And that's Jordyn with a Y. So jordynwhitebooks.com/courses.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to include a link to that in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. So let's talk now about Jordyn White. So yeah, Donna Cook is the one personality, obviously the
Yeah.
one who helps writers and
Yes.
helps teach them and things like that. But Jordyn White is the passion, right? Is the storyteller. Let's talk about where did Jordyn White come from?
So Jordyn White is, Donna Cook is a storyteller too. I'm one of those writers where if I could write in 3 different genres at the same time, I absolutely would.
Yeah.
Christine Catherine Rush said something about if she had, if she could write with 2 hands, she'd write 2 stories at the same time. And that's definitely how I feel. Donna Cook has some fantasy books out there. She writes epic fantasy. Jordyn White is the other writer part of me. And the reason why I have been focusing on Jordyn is because she likes to write romance. I love a good love story. And it really, honestly, it came down to practicalities. Right. I'm not going to write anything I don't want to write. So I think sometimes
Right.
people think, oh, you were just chasing the money. And that wasn't it. I actually love writing the romances. But I can write contemporary romance a lot quicker than I can write an epic fantasy that's 150,000 words, right? It's a completely different process. And so once I understood that if I wanted to have my author business be my 100% focus, if I wanted to be able to provide for myself 100% based on royalties, you have to have a lot of books. Typically speaking, you need to have a lot of
Right.
books. Donna Cook isn't going to have enough books for that for probably 20 years. She writes a
Okay.
little slow. So Jordyn, it's been so much fun. So I have 2 series out that are complete. I'm starting a brand new one this month. I just started the new one, and I'm just going full force with her. I went to, in fact, this is something else we need to talk about, but Colleen Story is another author who runs the Writing and Wellness site, which is fantastic. I really recommend it. And I invited her to a local group that I run, and she talked about taking the leap. And in business school, apparently, they will teach you when you should take a risk. how you know if it's a risk you should take. We don't get a lot of instruction about that as authors. We're kind of flying by the
Yeah.
seat of our pants, doing our thing. And of course, I had been and also editing at the time. I've been a book editor for a number of years, and so my attention was always divided. After sitting through that, I realized that I really needed to 100% focus on Jordyn. And so I shuttered my editing business. I just wrapped up my last big editing job last month, and I've been going full force with it. And it's been amazing, the benefit of being completely focused like that. I feel like I'm taking big leaps with this because I've been able to just 100% focus on that. So I've brought on a couple of experts, consultants who have experience in my exact subgenre that I write in, and they're giving me a lot of really great advice and guidance. And so we've rebranded the website. We're in the process of rebranding the covers, and we've got a plan, of course, for I have several books that are coming out this year. So it's been fun. I was talking to my aunt the other day, and she likes to ask about these things, and she told me that she could tell how much happier I am just because this is all I have to do. I don't have to do a bunch of other things that always felt like a distraction. So
Right.
it's been really satisfying to just say, this is my focus, this is my push. It's been
That is cool. So do you, I know you write different genres, Jordyn White and Donna Cook. Do you write in different spaces? Do you write in different, like, do you have a different ritual or routine that you follow? Or is it just the genre that is different?
It's just the genre, and I haven't written Donna Cook for a while. When I first started the Jordyn White pen name, I had this idea that I could do both, build both, and I still am hoping that I'll be able to do that. But poor Donna Cook's been a little neglected for a while. I haven't written fantasy for a while because, again, I think that's dividing. I really need to put everything I can into this one,
Right.
get that to a certain point. Eventually, I won't be releasing 5 books in a year. It'll be 2 or 3, in which case then I'll have extra time, right, to also work
Right.
on the fantasy. But no, in terms of my space, I do have a ritual to get into writing, but I'm in the same space. I'm in my writing room right now. I've got a big table. On one side I can stand and work, on the other side I can sit. I've got a big monitor.
Okay.
But what clues me in is the music that I listen to. So I put on a certain kind of playlist if I'm getting ready to write. It's always the same song so that my brain knows, okay, it's writing time. I listen
So
to
Jordan's listening to certain.
Jordyn's listening to some music. It's time to get busy, and
Okay.
then I listen to different music if I'm doing marketing or that kind of thing. And then I had a different playlist when I was editing. So it just told
Can
my
we
brain
ask
what we're
what genre of music Jordyn listens to as opposed to the genre that Donna has on?
doing. So yeah, so Donna will listen to all sorts of different things. I have kind of eclectic taste, and that's bled over into my marketing stuff. So it could be anything from like Metallica to Kelly Clarkson, like whatever.
Okay.
I have a little playlist, and I'm not real savvy on the tech stuff. So I have a YouTube playlist, which I know is
Okay.
not the thing, nevertheless. But for my writing, I can't have words. It's got to be instrumental. So there's
Okay.
I don't know if this is a group or just the channel or what it is, but it's called Pandora's Journey, and it's just instrumental stuff, and it kind of gets me going. So yeah.
I'm like you. I can't. The lyrics get in my head and get on the page.
Right. Yeah, I can't do it. It's
Yeah.
too distracting. Then I want
So
to sing
soundtracks
along.
are nice too sometimes. Some of the soundtracks that are, I mean, not the soundtracks with the lyric music, but the actual, sound from the movie.
Lord of the
Uh,
Rings is one of my favorite soundtracks to
Jurassic
listen
Park, I
to.
still,
Wonder
still all these
Woman.
years. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Those are the kind. Yeah, there you go. Some
Yeah.
fun stuff.
In fact, I have a giant poster. I'm looking right at her of Wonder Woman. When that movie came out, I told my kids that I wanted a little, little one, and my son got
Yeah,
a giant, huge poster from
awesome.
Walmart. So I'm like, I'm putting her up there, and I've got a little tiny Wonder Woman thing up there. This is my superpower room. So I try to embrace that energy of, go for it.
That's awesome. So what's the latest release from Jordyn that has just come out or is just about to come out in the next week or
So
so?
then, well, the one that just came out is a holiday book, but really the I wrapped up my second series with Beautiful Deep. So that's the 4th book, but I write interconnected standalone. So there's a series of 4 books. Different siblings have a book. They can be read in any order. But if you go to
Right.
jordynwhitebooks.com, it's a brand new website. We just polished that baby up. She's looking nice and pretty now, and you can see all of my books. But Beautiful Deep is the newest one there. And then the new series is I don't know if I'm allowed to say the title yet.
Oh,
I have
okay,
people
fair
who know
enough.
how to do stuff like this, and they've got all these plans. I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but it's going to be
Okay.
fun.
There's a new one coming out that people can look out, and if they go to jordynwhite.com, they can check that out, right?
Yep. And then
Or
something
sign up to find out more.
yes, you can sign up to find out more. And then also, we just tried something new. Do you know who Elizabeth Ann West is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she has something on her website where you can read a book right on her site, and can flip through. So I actually did that on
Yeah.
mine. So I'll give you the link to read Beautiful Mind, which is the first series, or the first book in my second series, where people can just read it right on the website. They don't have to sign up. They don't have to download. It's right
So the
there.
benefit is you can read it online, but does that give you an idea and measurements as to people that are actually reading it? Like how many people are actually reading it? Is that one of the benefits of doing that?
Right. So you are the first one I've told about this. So we haven't started tracking it. It's brand new that we just put
Okay.
in, and the designer's still getting the pixels set up so we can track it. But yeah, the whole
Okay.
idea is to, from my perspective, it gives me another way to kind of get a book out there, get it in front of people, and
Right.
try to remove some of the barriers. If they're like, I don't want to be in another list, I don't want to have to
Right.
download something. They just want to
So here
see.
it is now. It's free,
Yeah.
no obligation. Just read it.
Right,
Okay.
because at the end of the day, the point of the marketing is to get people to look at our story, and then the story has to sell itself. Either it's the kind of thing they want to read, or it isn't, and it doesn't matter. It's just
Right.
they are trying to figure out, is this an author that suits me and fits me? Do I like this book? So it gives them a chance to do that, and they could read the whole book on there, or they can, of course, download it.
Oh, that's cool. Again, more options, right? More
Yep.
options for readers to, yeah, and I like that idea. And it's like, yeah, another list. I have to download it. I have to do this.
Mhm.
Then, yeah, I can just read it now.
Yeah.
That's great. So, what are some of the things? You're going to be in person. You had mentioned your friend who's running a conference as well, and you're going to be at a few places where people may be able to either see Donna or Jordyn or both of them at the same time.
Right. Same face, different names. Right. So Colleen Story and we've kind of had a working partnership for a while. We are doing a one-day workshop in Boise, September 14th. It's called Writer CEO. And there's a couple of different things that we're going to be doing there. She's going to be giving her Taking the Leap presentation, which was just phenomenal. And I think it's really good information about how you determine, is this a risk that is smart for my business to take? I'm
Right.
going to be talking about cash flow. So that will be in the morning. And then in the afternoon, there's different options. So we'll talk everything from, what is your author theme and why do you need one? And what do you do if you feel really overwhelmed? What are some strategies? Or, what are the important mind shifts you need to go through to go from an aspiring author to a professional? There's key mind shifts that you have to undergo so that you can take the actions necessary to be successful at that level. We're going to talk about that. And then we're holding some time for advanced marketing strategies, which I will be putting together really as it gets closer, because things change all the time. So we'll
Oh
just
yeah,
be talking
September is
about
quite a
what's
ways
current.
away.
It's a long time. Who knows what's going to be happening by then? So we'll be talking about what's current at that point. So that'll be a fun one. And then I'm also presenting at NINC this year, which I'm really excited about. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, that is great.
Yeah.
I get to see you again at NINC, which will
Yes,
be fun.
it'll be
That'll
fun.
be good times. So just sort of another question about Donna and Jordyn, because I'm fascinated by these two wonderful women, is how do you divide up your time? Is like between doing the right now, since Donna Cook's not doing much fiction writing, Donna Cook's the businesswoman and
Right.
the marketing person, etc., and the teacher, and Jordyn's the writer. Do you divide it up by like within a single day? Is it by the week? Are there days of the week that you switch? Like how does that work?
That's a good question. I just devised a new strategy for 2019 because I'm going to be doing quite a lot of traveling this year, but I also have a lot of books to write this year. And so I'm trying something new. What I had been doing was I would do writing in the morning and then everything else in the afternoon. That way I'm getting
Okay.
the most important thing done first. Plus,
Okay.
I'm a morning writer. But what I'm doing for 2019, because I was thinking that I needed to make sure I was hitting a certain word count every day, or something like that. But that's actually not the way my muse works. I'm more of a kind of a big push, and then I need to
Right.
rest for a while, and then do a big push and then rest for a while.
Okay.
And so Most of my traveling is happening in the summer, so I'm writing almost everything that's coming out this year will be written by the middle of July, because I don't
Okay.
have near as much going on. So I'm doing 4 weeks to write a book and then 2 weeks off, and then 4 weeks to write a book and then 2 weeks off. And I'm doing that all the way through about the middle of July. And then I don't have any writing planned for about 3 months, because I'm in New York a couple of times. I'm going to Chicago. I'm going to Florida. I'm going all over the place. So I don't want to be trying to write in the middle of all that. And then I'll write my first 2020 book in October. So I have it planned out in blocks, and
Okay.
as soon as I came up with that plan, I felt so much better. Like, okay, this is a way I can write. And so I've had to sort of clear my calendar during my writing times. I have Saturday as an admin day. That way,
Okay.
during the week, the only thing I have to think about is the book. When I step away from the computer, I'm thinking about a scene that's coming up or a problem I'm trying to unravel. It gives my brain permission to just think about that. So my writing time is much more effective that way.
Right.
When instead of stepping away and thinking, oh, I have to do such and such for social media, or oh, I have to do such and such for the cover, it just gives my brain permission to just think about the book. And it's been so fun. It's worked out really well.
So Monday to Friday, Jordyn's just having a blast, and then on the weekends, admin Donna shows up. Is that
Admin
how
Donna
that works?
shows up on Saturdays, and then Sunday I just leave as a rest. That's when mom and wife
Okay.
is there, and that's when I give my brain a chance to unclench and unfurl and just relax and do something sort of mindless. Otherwise, I'll burn out in the middle of the week if I don't give myself a day to just relax. But then there's a local group that I help run one Wednesday a month. So that was just this past Wednesday. So I just shoveled a whole bunch of meetings on that day. It was just meeting all day long, because that was easier for me than spreading it out on my writing
Right.
days. I don't want to be thinking about that on my writing days. And I have another one coming up this Tuesday, and then it'll just be Saturdays until this book
Oh.
is done. So yeah.
That is great. So the last question is, I guess, going back, knowing now what you know from your experience as Donna and Jordyn, what would you go back and tell Donna Cook, who was just starting as a writer? What advice would you give her to pay attention to?
Oh my goodness. That's such a good question. Of course, there's a lot of things, but the first thing that came to my mind is patience.
Okay.
I think that this is a topic that comes up in a lot of the local speaking and teaching that I do, and I work with a lot of other authors as an editor, or I did. And almost universally, when writers first start out, they think, I'm going to be the one that just takes off and it's going to be amazing. And, this one book, everyone's going to see how genius it is, right? Like we entertain that fantasy. And a lot of times I'll get questions from other editors. How do you get writers to stop doing that? And my answer is, well, you don't. And why would you want to? Because life will happen and they'll figure out that that's not what their path is going to be. But I think we need a certain amount of passion to drive us forward in what we do. But,
Right.
but at the same time, we do have to be patient. You have to be willing to, of course, at that time when my first book came out and I wanted to know, how do I market this thing? How do I get it out there? What do you hear? Write the next book. The best thing you can do is write the next book. Well, it took me years to write that first book. I didn't want to hear that that was what I had to do. I wanted to get this going right now. But really patience. And the way that's more informed what I do now is this whole concept of pick what is the most important thing you need to be doing right now. What marketing task is going to give you the most power, propel you forward the best? What do you need to set up? Is it your onboarding, whatever it is? And don't do anything else till that's done. Be patient, get that done, knock that domino over, and then move on to the next thing. And when you adopt that strategy, you can feel like other people are zooming by you. But after a while, those things that you gain a certain amount of momentum when you're smart about what you're doing. Just be patient and do what needs to be done, and it'll happen.
Well, that is fantastic advice. Thank you so much. So we know we can find out about your Jordyn White at jordynwhite.com. Is it donnacook.com for the
It's
finance?
DonnaCookAuthor.com. Donna
Okay.
Cook is a strangely common name. It's really bizarre. So yeah,
Really?
DonnaCookAuthor.com is where you can find out about my epic fantasy. And those books are good for people who like the type of fantasy like Harry Potter and Aragon and books like that. That's what those kind of fit into that genre. They're fun.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with me today during your admin day.
My admin day. That's right. We set it up on a Saturday.
That's right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Donna.
Thank you.
I was really intrigued by the advice that Donna talked about, the advice that she would give her younger self. She spoke about patience. And it reminds me of this story that I was recently reminded of, the story of Picasso in a cafe, a French cafe, and he's sitting there and a gentleman approaches him and hands him a napkin and asks if he could sketch something. So Picasso takes the napkin and he takes a piece of charcoal, and in about 30 seconds he sketches something really, really quickly. And the man says, "Great, how much do you want for it?" And Picasso says, $100,000. And he says, $100,000? It took you 30 seconds to create that sketch. Picasso says, "No, my friend, it took 40 years for me to create something like that." Similarly, the current men's world record for the 100-yard dash is 9.58 seconds. It was set by Usain Bolt in 2009. But it didn't take Usain less than 10 seconds to break the record. It took years and years of hard work, of training, of sweat, of perseverance, of getting up early and working for hours and hours for that 10-second goal to happen. We regularly only see the person crossing the finish line, celebrating the win, receiving the Academy Award, holding up the Stanley Cup. Okay, that's a Canadian hockey reference. I couldn't help it. But what we rarely see are those tireless hours of repetitive practice, the painstaking training, the hard work, the blood, the sweat, the tears that happened along the way to get there. And that's the tough part about the writing. Finding or making the time to get the writing done while you're working full-time, or if you have a family and friend obligations, struggling to get your butt in that chair and your fingers on the keyboard when everyone else is enjoying the latest episode of Game of Thrones, or binge-watching Marie Kondo on Netflix and then finding joy in objects around the house, or going onto social media to share a fun "how much have you changed in 10 years" meme that everyone is doing. All these things going on, all these distractions, all these simple right-now pleasures that you have to desperately fight against, like that person who's committed to a diet walking briskly past the donut shop when all they want to do is go inside and indulge like they see other people doing. You want to stop and enjoy it, but you know you must persist. You must struggle. You must work at it because writing is something you believe in. Storytelling is a part of your blood. The words must get through. The story, the characters that are in your head, the tales that they must tell must come out and onto the page. It's hard. It's a lot of long and lonely hours. It can involve agony and angst and frustration, but it can also bring such joy and such elation too. There are ups and downs, and there are long hours, and when you're in the very middle of a book-length project, sometimes the hardest part, the belief that you might never see the end. There are those moments of staring at your online dashboard and wondering why nobody is buying this book that you invested so much time into. Hours and days and weeks and months and years of backbreaking, finger-numbing, mind-breaking, mind-numbing work that seems like it will never end. And somewhere over the horizon, maybe you'll reach it, maybe one day in the future. It might not be hoisting up a prestigious literary award or watching your dashboard tick into the 6-figure ranking. It might take until the next day, maybe the next week, maybe the next month, maybe the next year. And the feeling of success might not be any significant thing like a New York Times bestseller status or other lofty goal. It could be the achievement of reaching new readers, people you don't know, or of reaching a single reader, of making a difference in at least one other person's life because you gave them inspiration in something you wrote. You allowed them to escape into a world that you created. Regardless of that passion play, that beautiful peak you achieved. It is yours because you worked for it. You persevered, and along the way you demonstrated an incredible degree of that thing that Donna mentioned that was so important, that patience. Well, that's the end of this episode of the Stark Reflections podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found the interview with Donna enlightening and engaging and entertaining and informative like I did. And I hope if you enjoyed this episode that you share it with someone that you think could benefit from it. Or feel free to leave a comment on social media. You can @me at markleslie.ca. You can also leave a review on the podcatcher of your choice. Thanks again for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. Looking forward to catching up with you again next week. And until next week, here's wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.